guests, Alan McAulay and James Whiteford. James is Scottish Building Standards Hub Director. He's leading on the business strategy and transformation. James' extensive and senior management experience with local authority, building standards, having previously worked with Scottish Borders, so you may have crossed paths, some of you on the line, and obviously does a lot of work with as a director of LABSS. Alan, his title is another director. He is the technical and operations and services. And Alan also has been working with the local authorities at South Lanarkshire Council. So I'm hoping today we'll kind of slightly demystify some of our work streams and let us know what the Scottish Building Hub has been doing during its pilot scheme, which was all last year. And now we have, it's fully up and running. And I've been kindly asked to sit on its board, although we haven't officially met yet. So if I could pass over to James, I think you're leading on the front end of this talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Thanks, Magdalena, for those introductions, and also thanks for inviting us both along today for this webinar by SIAT Scotland East. It is actually quite a large presentation, so I'll just get started and start rattling through it, and hopefully that means there'll be enough time for questions and any comments at the end. But thanks again very much for inviting us along today. Okay, so what we will cover today in this presentation are a brief background to the creation of the Scottish Building Standards Hub. We'll cover the aims, objectives and service delivery requirements from the Futures Board. We'll provide you a wee bit of insight to our new website and learning management system. We'll discuss what our operations will be, as well as what the staffing will be to support that. In addition, we'll go quite comprehensively into the range of building standards system services that will be delivered through the Scottish Building Standards Hub, as well as cover access to expertise, what we're doing in terms of learning and development, and we'll also give you a wee bit of an input regarding compliance plan, energy standards, and other regulatory changes that we're involved in. So in terms of background, it probably won't surprise you that obviously the tragic events of Grenfell Tower in 2017 and subsequently the Edinburgh schools defects led to a wee bit of disquiet, a wee bit uncertainty about the building standards system. As such, the Scottish Government came up with a ministerial working group, and they commissioned 2 expert review panels. The first of these review panels was on building standards fire safety in Scotland, and that was by Dr. Paul Stollard. Secondly, a building standards compliance and enforcement review panel was set up by Professor John Cole, and that report concluded that whilst the core elements of the current system should be maintained, some reshaping of the system is necessary to ensure that it addresses the identified weaknesses. So the overall aims of this reshaping through the Futures Programme Board was to drive efficiencies, ensure investment in skills and new technology, strengthen compliance, increase capacity within the Building Standards Service to deliver across all types of construction work. It also aimed to increase consistency, provide stronger resilience within the verifiers, and also increase more effective ways for collaborative working between verifiers throughout Scotland. So the Futures Programme Board, it was set up and it covered a total of 7 work streams. Ourselves, in terms of the Building Standards Hub pilot, came under the verification delivery model, and that had oversight from the delivery model working group. Sitting underneath that was a delivery model development group, and they were charged with Building Standards Hub development, and that was the direct oversight of the operations of the Building Standards Hub pilot. This was a collaborative approach between Fife Council, the Scottish Government Building Standards Division, Local Authority Building Standards Scotland, and also involved in the mix was all 32 local authorities as well as industry stakeholders. And at the time of this presentation, I think there's probably something in excess of 50 different industry stakeholders that we engaged with throughout the process, SIAT included. So the actual Building Standards Hub pilot, it commenced on the 23rd of May 2022. Towards the end of that pilot period and through Solace, Fife Council was identified as the potential host for the permanent Building Standards Hub. That was after the role had been offered to all Scottish local authorities. The Scottish Government's consultation on fees established the funding for the Scottish Building Standards Hub also, and Scottish ministers agreed the formal formation of the hub and funding in December 2023 and formally offered the host role to Fife Council at that time. Fife Cabinet Committee accepted that offer on the 11th of January 2024, and that was after considering their offer on that date. Not long after that, our delivery model working group agreed the name change, and we're now formally known as the Scottish Building Standards Hub. We do have terms of reference as well as a governance structure, as Gary alluded to, and at that governance structure and terms of reference were developed through our delivery model development group. The Scottish Building Standards Hub formally commenced on the 24th of May 2024, with Alan McAulay joining just before that date, and myself officially starting with the hub on the 10th of June. Just to give you a wee idea of our logo, some of you may have seen it. That was developed through Fife Council, through their team there. We do have a strapline, which is supporting transformation and quality in local authority verification delivery across Scotland. So hopefully you will see that a wee bit more moving forward. So the main objectives for the hub, you're probably not surprised to know that these do align with the original principles of the Futures Programme Board. So we do intend to support increased consistency nationally in building standards service. We do intend to support increased capacity with building standards services, to provide resilience to verifiers, and to support the drive for efficiencies. In addition to all this, we will support investment in skills and new technology. We'll do this by providing what we do across mainly three work areas. The first one is by providing a range of building standards system services. Now, these were the system services previously provided by LABSS and have been administered and managed through the hub pilot for the last 2 years. We'll also be supporting hubs of expertise and operational partnerships, and there's a wee bit more about that as we move through the presentation. And a big part of our work is also supporting learning and development. So in terms of delivering for local authorities, as I've hinted to in the last slide, we will now administer, manage and support all building standards system services. That is the Scottish Type Approval System, known as STAS, information papers, which are also available publicly to aid designers, and will also manage and administer the dispute resolution process, which some of you may have used already. In addition to this, we'll support and assist operational partnerships. Now, the two main operational partnerships we'll manage and support are LABSS Consortia Technical Working Group and Digital Delivery Group. That being because these are the main landing points between the hub and LABSS network. We'll develop guidance and also broker introductions to facilitate workload sharing. This is primarily in the area of building standards applications, whereby one authority may approach another authority to give them assistance in reducing numbers, either through a short-term blip or staff loss. That guidance is actually now available and is on our website. We'll also develop, manage and administer hubs of expertise, known as FireHub and StructHub. And as Alan will touch on later on, FireHub is actually particularly well advanced. In addition to those, we'll have in-house expert advice on fire safety design, energy design and environmental design, supplemented by general technical support for verifiers. We'll develop high-quality digitised training material held on an online learning management system. We'll also develop an online skills validation system to support demonstration of competency, and work in that area has also started. We'll develop and support delivery of training, education and CPD, And we have been delivering a lot of that over the last 2 years, either directly or in liaison with external stakeholders. Finally, we'll develop, maintain and manage a website supporting these services. Moving on to the website, since we're talking about it, this is a public-facing website with 2 member-only landing pages specifically for the Consortia Technical Working Group and Digital Delivery Group. This website also provides links to the Learning Management System for LABSS members only. All information papers, guidance and STAS approvals are now located on the Scottish Building Standards Hub website. The Scottish Building Standards Hub website is now the platform supporting services and operational activities within the verifier community. The LABSS website will become more of a members platform and work in that area to reduce the number of services signposted there is now actually starting to be reduced. Just to give you a wee screenshot of the main landing page, that's not all that's contained in it because it's one of these pages that you do have to scroll down to gain all the information, but that is what you would see if you logged in as a public user. The domain name is easy to remember, it's www.sbsh.scot. When a member logs in, you'll see there, I've zoomed in on the top right hand of the screen, you'll see Consortia Technical Working Group and DDG pages now available in the tabs. Just as a wee montage, just to show you what the work we've been doing on the run up to the Hub launch, those are just various screenshots of some of the web pages that are there, which will give you an indication of the type of information that's held there. But you'd be best visiting the website yourself rather than trying to read that on screen. Moving on to our learning management system, this is exclusive to LABSS members. You must be a registered LABSS member to access it. It delivers high quality digital training material, and training is in a variety of formats, although the aspiration is that all training will be in an interactive format. The LMS system provides you with the ability to enroll in courses and track your progress through each course, as well as receive a certificate at the end. The LMS project started up to nearly 2 years ago, and as you probably realise, digital platforms and software does improve, so we will be progressing this LMS platform to what they now call the LXP platform. The reason for doing this is it will link in with a skills builder platform, which, as I've mentioned, we are looking into also, and that provides verifiers with the ability to record what skills they have, as well as what skills gap analysis there is. Just as another wee screenshot, that is a screenshot from the website showing the link that accesses the LMS. And there is another montage of our LMS system, just to sort of show you the main landing page in the top right, a sub-landing page in the bottom left. The top left is some of the courses we've developed. There's something in the region of 30 courses there just now. And in the bottom right is an example of the higher end interactive learning material that we provide. You'll be familiar with the type of platforms that's used to develop this. You have various options at the bottom, various questions through the interactive training material, various things you have to view and access to gain completion. So just moving on to operational aspects of the Hub. As alluded to, it is hosted within Fife Council. It is within Protective Services there, but as a standalone unit. As mentioned before, we do have governance, whilst line management and corporate activity and governance comes from Fife Council. The advisory board will format our strategic direction. In addition to this, because we can't represent the whole of industry on the advisory board, we are also involved with a stakeholder engagement forum, and at this present time, that is the Building Standards Stakeholder Group. The cost to run the Hub is £1.3 million per annum, and as alluded to before, that is funded through an increase in building warrant application fees. There is also a funding mechanism and funding agreement in place between Scottish Government and Fife Council, so that money, so the increase in application fees is diverted to the Hub within Fife. Just to repeat this whole process in terms of hosting, governance and funding, it's been supported by COSLA, SOLIS, the Scottish Government through the Building Standards Division, LABSS, local authorities and industry stakeholders that we've consulted with. Unlike local authorities, any money that the hub gets in its annual budget surpluses are protected. They are carried forward to the following year. They're not lost into the corporate pot at the end of the year. Scottish Building Standards Hub support is exclusive to local authority building standards development. That's how it was set up. However, as you probably appreciate from today, there is extensive stakeholder engagement that supports that support that we can provide to local authorities. Staff work to local authority corporate procedures, and staff are local authority employees with the same benefits and rights as any other local authority worker. Staff are all designated home workers. We are a remote working unit. However, we do have base and meeting facilities at Fife House in Glenrothes. Just to finalise some of the other operational aspects in terms of staffing, as you'll be aware, there's 2 hub directors, Alan leading on technical operations and services, and myself leading on business strategy and transformation. We have just undertaken interviews for learning and development manager towards the end of last week, and we hope to be in a position to notify the preferred candidate this afternoon of their potential appointment. Supporting the L&D manager as a learning and development officer, we do have the job advert written for that post ready to go out. However, we're not going to advertise it until we know who the learning and development manager is, as clearly they would want some input into that subsequent appointment. Similarly, there's 3 technical support surveyors within the hub. All those posts have been advertised, and the closing date was actually yesterday for those posts. So we'll be going through the recruitment process there very shortly. We have 2 expert technical support surveyors, 1 in fire and 1 covering environment and energy matters. Again, the job adverts are ready to go for those posts, and they will be advertised shortly. Also, another 2 posts that will be advertised shortly is 1.5 full-time equivalent admin and technical support officers. That provides a total full-time equivalency within the hub of 10.5 employees. Just to cover what each employee or range of employees does, that both the learning development manager and officer, they'll support workforce strategy, including MA and graduate apprenticeship schemes. They'll develop training material for various forums, including development of digitised training material and LMS, LXP platforms. They will support the ambassadors' networks that are run through LABSS, and they'll also deliver and organise CPD. A big part of their work will be liaising with stakeholders, education bodies, providers, and professional and trade organisations. The expert technical support surveyors in fire and in energy environment will represent the hub, supporting local authorities on Fire Hub and Struct Hub and other forums. They'll lead on Scottish Building Standards Hub services and activity relating to fire safety design and energy environmental design. They'll support peer review on matters relating to fire and energy environment also. And they'll also provide technical support on their areas of expertise. The technical support surveyors, a big part of their work will be assessing national type approvals centrally within the hub. They'll contribute to technical research and authorship in relation to information papers, and will assist in the research and provide technical procedural and regulatory advice in relation to the dispute resolution process. They'll provide direct technical support to local authorities and provide subject matter expertise on a variety of national forums, workshops and projects, representing the local authority position. They'll also represent the hub and support LABSS Consortia Technical Working Group activity. Supporting everybody within the hub is the Admin and Technical Support Officer. They'll assist in registration, validation and approval of staff applications. They'll support the services and activities of all hub business units. They'll ensure all information papers and dispute resolution process cases are correctly registered and recorded, informing all relevant stakeholders of outcomes. They'll also ensure data information recording measures are accurate and current, interrogating the same for accuracy, and they'll also compile statistical return information. Now I'd like to hand over to my colleague Alan for the second part of the presentation.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again to SEAT for giving us the opportunity to speak to you all today. It's actually good to see so many familiar names on the session today as well. Good to catch up with a lot of you. As Gary said, and James alluded to there, I'm Alan McAulay. I'm the other director of the Scottish Building Standards Hub, and as James has mentioned, I'm leading on the areas of technical operation, building standard system services, and as I say, more operationally focused. And there might be areas in this side of the presentation that more aligned to some of the benefits that the hub can provide to you guys. Just to say at the outset that I do hope the creation of the Scottish Building Standards Hub will be a positive landmark moment for the building standard system in Scotland. And as I say, over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk really quickly. I'm going to cover the full range of building standard system services that will be administered within the hub. Just before we move to the next slide, James, I just want to touch on dispute resolution initially. The hub itself will deliver the formal LABSS dispute resolution process, and that, just for your own information, provides recourse to an applicant, an agent, etc., where they disagree with the technical interpretation of the verifier, and it allows for a peer review of that decision by the verifier's peer group within their local consortium. It's recognised by the Building Standards Division in the procedural handbook as a kind of practical mechanism to resolve conflict of opinion relating to building standards without necessarily having to go down one refusal or ministerial view process. They are fairly popular at this moment in time, and I'm happy to provide any further information on that service to SEAT members going forward. The same is true of any of the other areas that I'm going to mention. We can only cover it in so much detail. If you want us to dig a little bit deeper, approach us direct, approach us from an organisational point of view, from a individual company point of view. As Magdalena said, happy to come back and talk about any one of these in a lot more detail going forward. So we're just going to cover all the areas at a kind of fairly high level. So dispute resolution is one of those areas that the hub is taking forward on behalf of Local Authority Building Standards Scotland. Thanks, James. So the other one, and again, you might have some maybe of knowledge to you, is the Scottish Type Approval Scheme. Benefits of STAS are clear and well established. It's now been in place as part of the Scottish Building Standards system for over 20 years now, essentially meaning that verifiers do not need to reassess parts of an application covered by STAS approval. That in turn provides greater speed and consistency in the building warrant application process, and hugely ties into some of the aims that James mentioned. Huge consistency and certainty for the applicant, but it also gives time savings and resource savings for the verifier and makes the process a whole lot more efficient. And I think we estimate, based on our work to date, that STAS has a potential to reduce time spent on any application by the verifier by up to 80%, because essentially all that's left for them to assess is site-specific characteristics. And the Permanent Hub will have the capability, through our three-number full-time technical experts as well as others, to proactively work with industry to optimise the potential of STAS. It not only provides support to national house builders, although they by far remain our biggest customers. We can also support new and innovative construction techniques and approaches, the move to modern methods of construction, etc., by providing early reassurance of compliance with building regulations before the first warrant is submitted. We have several active inquiries ongoing just now in that regard. We can also provide type approval for standard detailing and specification without necessarily being associated with a specific building footprint. Excuse me. And we also support type approval for non-domestic buildings as well. And you can see some of our kind of customers that we've got at this moment in time snapshotted onto that particular slide. As I say, if you think STAS may benefit the work you do, drop us an email. Happy to discuss the benefits in more detail. But the whole idea of STAS coming into the hub is that we can be far more efficient and proactive and get greater benefits from the STAS principles. Thanks, James. So moving on to information papers. James alluded to these, and again, the main purpose of information papers for designers and developers is where there are questions or issues that have been raised with respect to the application of technical standards or of legislative processes, that we can create guidance for verifiers to allow for a consistent and quicker and more efficient processing of these areas of technical interpretation. At this moment in time, they are driven by feedback from verifiers, but they can equally originate from feedback from members, the likes of SEAT. I'm sure you have areas that you see inconsistencies from verifiers. Please bring them to us and we can start to see whether an information paper might clarify those areas and get the building warrant application process a little bit more efficient. So we hope that the stakeholder engagement we've had today will bring forward a whole range of areas that we can explore in terms of future information papers. The hub itself, with our full-time equivalent staff, will be able to be far more effective to increase those numbers and to reduce the time it takes from inception to publication. We have a whole range of papers that are in a bit of a backlog since we'll be going through that hub pilot process, and hopefully over the next 6 months to a year or so, when we bring on our full-time staff, we can get these through the system, and they'll be published on the hub website, as well as directly signposted to Verifas. Again, any areas that you think we can look at in those, then let me know. We can also build in, sorry James, you can back. We can also build in a review process for existing information papers as well. And the hub itself can do a lot of the heavy lifting with regards to the creation of those information papers, such as background research, consultation with relevant stakeholders, undertaking the drafting, the feedback process, which can be quite complicated at this moment in time. But the key thing to note is that through that consultation process, LABSS through the CTWG do provide guidance and feedback and agreement on the content of these information papers, but they do benefit all stakeholders to the system, but they are primarily for Verifas to benefit the building warrant application and assessment process. So any ideas in that regard, happy to hear them. Thanks, James. Just moving on to access to expertise, James mentioned the Fire Hub and the Struct Hub, so just want to allude to that a little bit more detail. Through the kind of new and enhanced partnerships that we have created over the last 2 years or so, in general terms, if a local authority verifier wishes to engage with a specific body for whatever reason, we can facilitate that. We have those connections now, and they are really, really valuable. That can work two ways as well. We can be approached by an industry body to seek clarification on who they should approach with a particular issue, whether that be Hub Direct or whether we put them in place with a relevant verifier. That network can hopefully work both ways as well. Just in terms of workload sharing, the hub, as James mentioned, will facilitate sharing of workload between local authority verifiers in the assessment of building warrant applications, brokered by introducing a local authority who requires assistance with a local authority whose business model provides that service. And those discussions are ongoing at this moment in time, and the idea being that we balance out the peaks and troughs of performance across the country, and that's something that might take a few months, if not years, just to kind of bed in, but hopefully there is benefits there to all users of the system. And we do, as James mentioned, also have guidance and template working to make that partnership arrangement a little bit more efficient between verifiers. We can also provide direct advice to verifiers on specific matters, and we inundated with inquiries from verifiers on certain areas, and we can respond to that. And as I say, that hopefully frees up little kind of blockages and bottlenecks in the system where previously the verifier might have been stuck or had to go to the BSD, etc. So we can provide general advice on procedural matters, technical matters. We can provide that advice directly, or we can liaise with specific subject matter experts, depending on the nature of the inquiry. And again, happy to get inquiries from the likes of CEAT and CEAT members in that regard as well. So moving on specifically just to the Fire Hub, there is another strapline here for you in terms of the Fire Hub, which is taken from our draft terms of reference document. And it just kind of, I've tried to succinctly outline what the Fire Hub will be. So the primary purpose of the Fire Hub is to provide expert advice to local authority verifiers where requested, as related to the verification of complex fire engineered solutions. It's quite a narrow avenue of work that the Fire Hub would be involved in. But the Fire Hub may also be convened by the Scottish Building Standards Hub to discuss general fire safety related matters. So that could be something like a national fire safety issue, or emerging technologies or skills or new ways of working. Then we can convene a collaborative approach of relevant experts across the country to discuss those areas. Again, all to benefit the building standard system as a whole. That's the very, very high level overview of the Fire Hub. Just to go into it in a little bit more detail, but not too much. This was a slide that's more relevant to local authority verifiers in terms of the level 1, level 2 areas of expertise and the various ways by which a verifier can assess fire engineered solutions, whether that be handbook compliant, totally in-house, minor deviations, which in some situations may require a degree of partnership working with an external third party, to the level 3 type work where you get into really complex stuff. Verifier might still have expertise in-house, might have a third party, but in such situations they could also approach the Fire Hub for that individual support. But the key thing about the Fire Hub that I wanted to outline is that one of the key aims that we want to make sure is that we support learning and development in fire engineering, so that verifiers are ideally self-serving in that regard, and they don't have to rely on third-party peer review going forward. Could even be an element of workload sharing across verifiers, across consortiums, because not every authority can justify having an expert fire engineer. So again, we are best placed to facilitate that workload sharing. And again, just strategically, the principles which underpin this area of our work are intended primarily to increase and improve the level of knowledge and skills in fire engineering within verifiers, and not for the hub to take over those roles. We want to support verifiers making robust decisions at that local level. Centralising these types of decision making we don't consider to be in the best interests of verification. We will support verifiers as much as possible. We're required in the short to medium term to allow them to upskill, but we'll just monitor this area of work going forward. So that's a very, very high level overview of this area of work. Same principles apply to the Struct Hub, and this will be developed as we finalise the operational aspects of the Fire Hub itself. But meantime, we can still assist in brokering arrangements between verifiers on the checking of structural calculations. That's work that's ongoing. And we can also provide advice to verifiers on non-verification activities, enforcement, licensing, raised structures, safety at sports grounds, is all areas of active discussion. For example, we're in discussion with a number of local authorities at this moment in time who routinely host major golf events. I'm sure you know the authorities, to facilitate joint discussion and the establishment of best practice, so that we're all doing things a little bit more joined up, a little bit more efficient. And we can work that principle from major golf events, Section 89 restructures, into live entertainment events, to make sure verifiers and the wider local authority building standards team are supported in these areas of kind of specialism across the country. So thanks, James. On to the digital hub. Again, digital transformation in the digital hub is another key area of our work, and the Scottish Building Standards Hub is that we are situated as that communications and strategy conduit between verifiers and stakeholders. We also support and host the LABSS Digital Delivery Group. So the hub will facilitate representation, liaison, engagement with Scottish Government's e-development team, the wider Scottish Government's e-development agenda, but also with wider stakeholders on transformational matters for the likes of, with IDOCS, who are the local authority back office system supplier. So we can support LABSS and 32 local authorities to consider and prioritise areas of development, as opposed to 32 individual authorities going to IDOCS, going to the Scottish Government with their own individual asks. We can act, as I say, as that conduit to make sure those discussions are a little bit more efficient. We'll also bring forward a whole range of tools to support transformation, to support local authority managers, to support their own teams a little bit better, and in general just promote best practice and support the BSD and local authority teams to improve customer experience. Everything I've mentioned before all builds in to improving the customer experience, and not just building more applicants, but developers, architects, agents. I'm sure many CIT members in there as well. Just touching on CAS again there, James has covered that. It's already been introduced with huge support from LABSS and the BSD, and I think competency is something that's going to be on all our radars, particularly as we look forward to the Grenfell Phase 2 inquiry, which will be coming out in September, and I'm sure there'll be a further focus on competency from that. So we have a head start in that regard with the competency assessment system already up and running, but we need to take it a little bit further forward. We need to get it a little bit slicker. We need to digitise it, make it a little bit more efficient for local authority building standards teams to work with. But it does mean that assessment of competence is the same in one local authority as it is across all 32 local authorities. And as James mentioned, it allows us to gather those skills gaps that have been identified through the CAS and work strategically with partners such as SEAT to address that particular need. And as I say, the CAS is the basis for support and discussion with ongoing validation and accreditation of building standard staff across the country. We need to demonstrate the skills of verifiers to Scottish ministers so that we can continue the verification appointment process. So moving on to just a couple other areas of learning and development, I just wanted to pick out the Scottish Building Standards Hub will deliver modern and graduate apprentice learning and development sessions to continue support for lecturing to further education establishments. Myself and a couple of our colleagues are involved in guest lecturing at Cali, and we're hoping to increase that to other further education establishments as well. We'll also further develop access to training from external sources, and again, want to work with CEAT in that regard as well. There could be opportunities for being aware of material that you guys have got, and in turn we can let you have access to some of our learning materials or direct training opportunities in there as well. So a lot of potential in that area that we want to take forward with our learning and development team when they are in post. Thanks, James. The next slide is just a bit of a summary around some of our business as usual activities. So while we're going through that extensive recruitment process, our stakeholder engagement is limited, but it's still part of our primary aim. So again, we would wish to not engage with any relevant stakeholders. So again, further engagement sessions on specific areas of our work, more than happy to engage with CEAT to programme them in. We are responding to inquiries in a whole range of areas as business as usual activity. That's absolutely fine. And we continue to our wide representation on a whole range of relevant working groups. So again, summary of our business as usual activities. Just on compliance plan, the next slide. Again, that we could have a whole session on compliance plan, and maybe we will do in the future, Gary, as this one becomes more pressing for us all. But we, in terms of the role of the Scottish Building Standards Hub, we work with the Scottish Government to continue the rollout of the early adopters phase to support that, and to support verifiers on the move to the compliance plan approach. And that will be through providing guidance to verifiers, assisting in their understanding of the processes and what that means for reasonable inquiry. And again, there's a whole range of support and guidance that we need to redo on the back of that. So it's a key area of development for us going forward. We're also working with the BSD and LABSS and verifiers to reinforce procedural compliance, and by that I mean such as around occupancy and use of buildings without completion certificate acceptance. And again, this is something that came out the original kind of Cole report. So our aims and objectives do tie a lot back to False Dollar's report and Professor Cole's report as well in there. This is just a kind of summary, last few slides, you'll be pleased to know. And again, just alluding to some of the things that we've got ahead of us. You'll be aware of all the changes in 2019, 2021, 2022. So I'm not going to go through them in any great detail unless there is any areas of consistency or interpretation related to those standards. But I just wanted to touch on the sessions or the changes from February last year and from April this year, and then have a wee look to what's on the horizon in terms of further technical handbook changes. So just looking at the energy standards from 2023. Next slide, James. Thank you very much, sir. Key changes are noted on that slide. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but just to say that we continue to support verifiers on the application of these standards. They are still relatively new, although February 23 is quite a while away now. We are working with the BSD and RIS and BRE as the certifications design scheme providers to understand the challenges of applying those standards, those increased standards. Volume house builders and others to an extent are only now starting to look at revised designs to meet those standards, and we're starting to see STAS inquiries coming in for those. Such was just the volume of applications that came through the system prior to those changes in February 2023. So again, any concerns, any challenges that members have got around the application of those standards, let us know. We can hopefully work with you guys to clarify anything that's needed. The next changes that you got a glimpse of there was the electrical vehicle charging points, which came in June 2023. Again, there's quite a lot of discussion that we've been central to clarify the intent of these standards between verifiers, between Scottish Government and indeed the Scottish Government sponsors, which was Transport Scotland, of this particular requirement. Obviously, it's in building regulations. I'm sure you'll be aware of the standard, and again, we're supporting verifiers to ensure the intent of the standard is understood. For example, particularly, we've sought clarification on the definition of enabling infrastructure and on the level of compliance of certain innovative solutions that seem a good idea, but actually don't fundamentally meet the intent of the mandatory standard to have an EV charging point to serve all new dwellings at the point of creation, not when somebody buys an EV vehicle, for example. Again, any issues in the application of that standard, please let me know. The most recent changes, and I'm sure you'll all be familiar with this, it's a hugely active area of discussion, was the changes in the 1st of April this year, which saw the ban, shall I say, on wood-burning stoves or direct emissions heating systems. And there was a lot of kind of feedback to Scottish Government on that particular change, such that the ministers have agreed to review that standard, and that will be taken forward after the election. Could do a whole session on that one alone, and I'm happy to do so in the future if that would be of value once the Scottish Government have updated their review. But just in general terms, that we are now in place to support verifiers on the understanding of the intent, to provide clarification to the inquiries that verifiers are getting, and to work with Scottish Government and indeed Building Standards Division and the new build heating system team in the Scottish Government to understand the intent of these standards and provide robust guidance to verifiers, but also to wider stakeholders. So there's going to be an information paper, no doubt, on this particular standard, on EV charging points as well. Definitely they're on our to-do list already. So again, if your members are looking for clarification on this change, let us know. We can provide our best feedback to you guys as well. A couple of slides that I think are worthy of note. Housing Cladding Remediation Bill. Just to note that bill is now going through stage 3 and is now going for royal assent, and the Scottish Government have earlier this week published the single building assessment methodology. So that's of interest to you. Will they have a little look at that one? From our point of view, from the verifier's point of view, I'm going to say we have a limited role. That's maybe not so much true, but our role in the main is going to be for assessing building warrant application for cladding remediation work, and we want to support verifiers in a consistent and effective application of warrants. As you can imagine, that's quite high priority work for owners of building that are affected by it. We could also be involved in the responsible developer scheme with regards to the bar on developers accessing the planning and building standard system, something that's quite onerous. So we'll see how that goes forward. Definitely something to be aware of. Enforcement consultations, just want to touch on that to an extent. There are enhanced enforcement powers being considered by the Scottish Government, went through consultation, positive support for a number of changes which are on the screen there. Again, it ties in with an ever-increasing focus on compliance. Key thing at the bottom there, increased penalties for offences. It's moving up from 5k maximum fine to 50k maximum fine, but also the introduction of a 2-year prison sentence as well. So just making things a little bit more real in terms of penalties for offences under the Building Scotland Act. Thanks, James. Second last slide, I think. Looking at future developments, and again, this is important for you guys and the work that you would be undertaking. Specifically looking at fire, BSD are about to issue a direction to verifiers to dispense with Regulation 215 in certain low-risk conversion situations, and we can expand on that if that would be useful in another session. But the BSD are also considering the Sheriff's recommendations following Cameron House FEI, including consideration of suppression in buildings being converted to hotels, and in general, better considering the challenges of historic buildings, predominantly through the risks associated with cavities and voids. These and a number of other minor changes to Section 2 are being taken forward by the Scottish Government's Building and Fire Safety Expert Working Group, which is currently meeting. So again, we could have some more changes to Section 2 on the horizon later in this year. Again, a final horizon scan for you all. Building warrant fees increased in 1st of April this year. That's part of a first year of a 3-year model to increase fees potentially annually, dependent on monitoring and reporting on the use of the increase in fees one and subject to ministerial approval. While the 1st of April changes included an uplift from 2017, there was funding in there to support the Building Standards Hub, but very, very small aspect of that. The vast majority of that fees increases are going to local authority verifiers to facilitate and allow them to gear up over the next 3 to 5 years for the changes that are coming out from the Building Standards System, compliance plan, etc., etc. I wanted to allude to a couple of changes potentially later this year. We could see new technical handbooks maybe in November, December, might be published a little bit before that, around the requirement for gigabit broadband. planned infrastructure within new dwellings. And there's also a review ongoing just now on Standard 3.3 covering flooding and groundwater to re-emphasise the need for flooding risk assessment and where necessary flood resilient construction. So we focused, increased focus in that area. Perhaps one of the most important areas that I'm sure we've all got our eyes on is the introduction of a Scottish passive house equivalent. That working group is actively, well, I say it's been engaged and been in discussion for the last year or so just now, but there was a little bit of a pause on that after recent ministerial changes, the fall of the Butte House Agreement. So the current position from the Scottish Government is that they're going through a period of ministerial briefings on the principles of the Passive House Equivalent Review, but they still are planning on moving towards a consultation over this summer with the intention of laying enabling regulations in Parliament towards the end of this year. But any changes I would expect in terms of technical handbooks are not necessarily going to come in December this year. I think you're looking at 25, 26, even before those would be ready in terms of the necessary support and guidance and the calculation methodology tools that will be required for that. So a huge area of development going forward in there. Again, we're best placed to support verifiers in terms of the training and development of those areas and upskilling verifiers on all these potential changes, but we're also there to support upskilling and awareness across the construction sector. The last one I wanted to mention in there, I can't forget the recent Scottish Government, I think it was last year now obviously, committed to undertake a review of the Housing for Variable Needs document, and they are establishing on the process of looking at a Scottish accessible home standard, which will be implemented through changes to building regs. Again, they seem to be putting a lot of policy change into building regs, and that will see the requirements of the general section in the Housing for Variable Needs documents introduced into building regs for all new houses. So again, that's going to be a requirement for us all to consider. And again, all of these areas will require understanding, upskilling, learning and development, and the hub is best placed to do that for verifiers and associated wider stakeholders. I'll take a breath at that moment in time. There's our contact details. More than happy to take any questions at the moment or afterwards as members see fit. But I'll stop there and I'll pass back to Gary. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, James. Yes, I think you do need to take a breath. I was surprised when you said you were going to take 15 minutes, but anyway, that's just because I'd seen the slides. Is there any questions? Instead of putting a chat, does anybody want to put their hand up or ask a question? Stuart, you want to come in and give us your thoughts? Put your camera on.
Hi there. First of all, thank you very much, Alan. This is the first time I've attended one of these, and very interesting so far. I've got a few questions, if that's okay. But it doesn't prevent anyone else from wanting to put their hand up and jumping in. On the second page there, you spoke about, it was very quick, but you spoke about some sort of training verification. Was that for building control officers, or is that for agents?
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, I mean, our virtual learning environment and our e-learning materials are predominantly for local authority verifiers. There is a discussion and development to be had around licensing them out for further understanding, but that's not on our radar at this particular moment in time. But nonetheless, we are, and we do see part of our remit is to try and support learning and development of a whole range of industry stakeholders. So if there was a learning development need in a particular area of the building standard system that CI members highlighted, they could just bring it to us as an ask, and we could work with our learning development team to deliver that in a format that suits CIAT members, whether it is a session like this that can be recorded, or a face-to-face event, or attendance at your sort of annual events or something like that. But the development of e-learning material at this moment in time is predominantly is exclusively for local authority building standards teams, but there's development areas in there, but nonetheless there are options there to allow support and wider stakeholders. James, you want to come in on that, I'm sure?
Yeah, it's just a one wee complexity about the creation of the hub. I did kind of hint at towards this on one of my slides, but the whole purpose of the hub was there to support local authorities. That's what the money was there for. However, as Alan alludes to, if we can help local authorities by getting education and training out to the people that are using the system, that in turn helps local authorities. So that's the way we kind of play that. So it is a bit difficult saying, here, get access to our LMS. However, if there is an area, as Alan says, that you want training development on, which will help your understanding of how verifiers work or how a specific aspect is being looked at, yeah, we're totally happy to do that, because in turn that helps us in the overall round. Yeah,
because I've always been interested in the possibility of a verified and approved agent scheme. So in other words, you've got different levels of architectural technologists and architects, and within that, you could go forward to be fully approved and certified by the Scottish Technical Standards. And it would behold you to maybe a set of standards that when your building warrants were submitted to building control, they met minimum requirements, and that might speed up the process, but that's just an idea. Second question, given that increases to building control fees are ultimately paid for by either private individuals or small-scale developers, can you, in a sentence, give me just an overview of what the benefit actually is to the customer? It's all great for us. It's all great for things to be smoother in the building control process. But if a customer asks me why the fees are going up year on year, can you give me a sentence of how to counter that, please?
I dare say Alan will think of a quicker question than me. I certainly couldn't put it down to one question, but essentially it's down to the quality and the speed of service he's going to get, or she's going to get, through delivery of the hub's objectives. They'll get a more concise, robust service from local authority verifiers.
I think just to add to that as well is that I kind of alluded in the presentation that the funding of the hub equates to something like 1.3 million, James mentioned in there, which is 2% of building warrant fees nationally. So the increase in investment proportionately to the hub is relatively small, and in turn the value that the customer would get out of that, whether it be through greater speed of application through STAS or greater consistency in technical interpretation that would come out through information papers, or indeed that as you mentioned there, the overall quality of applications gets better because of our joint working around learning and development, then the customer ultimately benefits. I think when you look at the majority of fee investment to local authorities, that really is more aligned to the compliance plan process and a more effective reasonable inquiry process. Now, obviously, the customer building owner is responsible for compliance, but if we can be more effective in the checking that we're undertaking on site, then there is greater certainty on the built product at the end of the day. But I'm saying that in the context of our role for reasonable inquiry, which is proportionate, limited, risk-based checks. But at least if we can emphasise and reinforce the need for notification at key stages, it allows us to be on site at the appropriate time, as opposed to not getting notified until completion stage, and then we've got no chance and there's disruptive inspection. So there's, that compliance agenda, well focused on high-risk buildings, can trickle down into a lot more low-rise domestic alteration extension type work if there's greater emphasis on the roles and responsibilities, not just the verifier, but also the building owner in there as well. So should trickle down into a whole range of areas. That's certainly the plan in there to demonstrate that value for money of the fees increase.
James has got his hand up.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I mean, obviously there's a lot that we've been involved with and thinking around the edges with over the last 2 years that we can't possibly put across today to you, in the time that we've got. But just in terms of customer journey and things like that, obviously in terms of digital transformation, Scottish Government is one of our sort of key stakeholders and collaborators on that, and we're even looking at things like trying to develop apps for customers that they can maybe get for free, that once they get it, they plug in their building warrant and it automatically through AI lets them know where they've got to notify at different stages and all that kind of thing. So, a lot of I wouldn't say pie in the sky, I think it is getting real and it's getting closer, but those are the types of things that we can do through the hub in conjunction with our partners at Building Standards Division and others to try and deliver better services for the customer.
And I think just to come in on there, sorry Gary, just to come back in on that, Stuart, was that I mentioned type approval, and if there is any architectural firms that are engaged with a client that kind of works across, not nationally necessarily, but maybe regionally, one or two authorities, there could be opportunities for type approval at that scale. Previously, we just couldn't accommodate that because it was all a voluntary process. We're relying on lead authorities acting as, or local authorities acting as lead authority in there, but there's huge potential in there that we're only really scratching the surface on. So there are any architectural firms out there that think, wait a minute, I've got a client that maybe could use and use that skill. And one of the things that came into my head the other day was the publication from Homes for Scotland about the challenges of SME builders. Was it between 5 and 20 units or whatever SME is defined as? And I think there could be an opportunity there. Maybe those types of enterprises, businesses are not necessarily aware of type approval, same way that the national house builders are. So there's maybe the opportunity to engage with SME developers in there to benefit, to take the benefit of STAS, even if they're working across 1-2 authorities, still has a benefit there within STAS. So getting another areas for us to look at, Joe.
I think the only reason there might be a slight point of friction is I would say that the Scottish building standards system is probably a victim of its own success. The most people that I speak to, the view of building standards is that in terms of being a public body, it's one of the few that not only works, but actually works really well. So I think there may be some concerns, but I'm sure these concerns can be allayed that unfortunately government isn't very good at change. So I think that's great where you guys come in to help facilitate that change, because we've got a system that currently seems to work very well, and we need to make sure that these kind of improvements become just that. They do become improvements and not one of those things where change kind of starts to clog and back up the system. But no, all sounds really exciting, and I totally understand that. The next thing was about electric vehicle charging points. Is there any discussion around making these requirements geographically nuanced? I've currently been forced to put in a vehicle charging point in the west coast of Scotland that even if the client was to buy the most expensive electric vehicle, he's still about 100 miles short of reaching the nearest charging point, and nobody can actually remember that local charging point not having an out of order sign on it. So is there any intentions to make the requirements for electric charging points geographically nuanced?
At this moment in time, there is nothing that I can see from the Scottish Government that indicates a direction of travel in that regard, because a lot of the questions that we've been asking allude to that challenge, and they seem, the feedback we've had from the BSD through Transport Scotland is that the intent of the mandatory standard is aligns to the policy intent of the Scottish Government, such that minimum requirement is necessary. We've also had some questions around the infrastructure ability to cope with the increased demand, and I appreciate that's a different scenario. Major infrastructure projects with significant car parking provision, huge increased number of EV charging points. Is there an area of discussion there? Scottish Government note policy intent is clear. So again, there's huge infrastructure upgrade costs that the developers are bringing on board there. So, I suppose the context that I come from is that are we aware of any discussions with the BSD that alludes to a relaxation or consideration in that regard? No, I would have to say at this moment in time. But those are the types of things that more than happy to have the thoughts of member organisations and take them to the Building Standards Division and seek specific comment on that regard. Do you know what I mean? That's where we kind of sit as that kind of intermediary value-adding body there that doesn't have the political restrictions or overheads that the BSD have. The BSD advice, no offence to colleagues in the BSD, would just say it's ultimately for the courts and the verifier to decide. At least we can sit in there and add a little bit more meat to the bone based on our learning and knowledge. What we can do is take away the decision making from the local authority verifier, but we can at least push a whole range of information in their direction so that they're making decisions a little bit more consistently and with the best information. So that's only my view based on what I'm getting from the BSD just now. Local authority verifier may take a more pragmatic decision in terms of any solutions that take on board local challenges. I know that's maybe not answering it fully, but that's
no, it does.
That's all.
It does. And then final question, and I'll just thank everybody for letting me take up quite a bit of time at the end here. So every year the standards are getting I don't want to use the word stringent, let's say better. They're getting better, okay? The last increases to insulation requirements, fully understand why that needed to happen, but it pushed up the average house build of between 6 and 8%. As building control gets better and introduces more of these policies, is there any concern that we're going to remove the dream of building a home away from self-builders and self-financers and really put it beyond their reach and really move house building into the remit of just government and big-scale developers? Is there any thoughts that are given to that, of how these changes actually impact, you know, self-builders that have maybe saved up for 30 years and are looking to build a retirement home? And a lot of people we're finding now just cannot afford to build. So what's your view on that?
I think I probably wouldn't want to say too much. I think that's primarily a Scottish Minister's consideration. But what I would say, though, is that I think I mentioned that Homes for Scotland publication around the challenges of SME builders, and I think one of the areas in there was regulatory burden. I think it was more associated with planning. You know, but what comes on the back of that is the complexity and costs associated with building regulations. But as I mentioned in that last slide, there is a direction of travel in terms of more onerous fire standards, energy standards, accessibility standards. You know, so there does seem to be an inevitable direction of travel. Whether there's more options for funding streams to support these types of bodies, I don't know. I wish I could say something a little bit more positive, but again, probably well above my area of expertise, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Cool, no problem. I could talk about the planners for the next 2 hours, but I'll just thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
I think we could all talk about planners for quite a long time. But to be fair, it's not. You know, it's what they
have a hard job, to be fair.
Yeah, I'm having just gone through a planning appeal process. It's challenging, but yeah. Listen, that's been, for me, brilliant. I feel sure that I'm hoping that people kind of are slightly more demystified by many of the work streams that Alan, I keep seeing. I saw twice I saw him last week. We seem to keep meeting up on all of these things. And I do it because I think it's important that we as technologists are actually influencing legislation by speaking to the hub now and Building Standards Division and giving them the feedback that, you know, that, sorry, I've forgotten your name, I had to look it up. Our gentleman was just speaking just now, so that, you know, they kind of get a sense of reality. There is the direction that government want to go in, but it's trying to balance, as I see it, it's trying to balance it and make sure that we don't end up with regulations that we have to go back to the drawing board at the end of it. And it's interesting that you from what I'm picking up, I mean, I used to always go to BSD because I've had long-term relationship with many of them there and say, what's the intention of the regulations? And get that bit out of them when I was having a little tete-a-tete with one of our building and just say, look, and you just go back and say, look, this is what I think. Here's what I've tried to mitigate, what we're trying to do. Could you please reconsider? And I have to say that probably 99% they've said, yeah, see all your problems. Because the regulations are there for potentially new builds. They are not there. I mean, I've got a house that is, I think it's 50 square metres and 2 stories. And trying to put in downstairs toilets and the full activity spaces is near impossible. But we came to a balanced conclusion, discussing with them, what do you think? What do we need? And we eventually get there. It's about a debate with them. James, Alan, thank you very much.